Hey, how's it going? If you enjoy Reddit story narration, please like and subscribe for more.
r/ask Reddit people who take walks at night. What's the scariest thing you've seen? Story 1. During winter in a rural no-cell service kind of area. Completely dark, no street lights, nor anyone in sight. Temperatures were around 20 and it was snowing. I was walking my dog with a flashlight. Then I heard someone start screaming bloody murder. Flight or fight kicked in. It truly sounded like someone was being stabbed to death for what seemed like forever. I chose to find out what the hell was going on. What I found instead was beyond anything I expected. He was a 5-year-old boy wandering down the road all alone. All he was wearing were light flannel pants and a thin t-shirt. No shoes or hat, and screaming so loudly it echoed through the hills. I dropped my dog's leash and walked up to him slowly, gently and repeatedly telling him that I'm a mom and that he's going to be okay. I wrapped him into my arms and carried him to a neighbor's home to warm him by the fire and call for help. Story 2. I almost got kidnapped near a train station. Some dude drove up to me hella quick and insisted that I was some missing Canadian child and that he'd take me home. Coincidentally, a motorcycle cop happened to drive by and immediately pulled over after I waved him down. He approached the guy in the car very aggressively and told him off. The cop didn't arrest the guy or anything. The guy apparently told the cop the same. I thought he was a missing child story, but he did walk me over to the train station and stayed with me until the train actually arrived. Story 3. I almost got kidnapped near a train station. Some dude drove up to me hella quick and insisted that I was some missing Canadian child and that he'd take me home. Coincidentally, a motorcycle cop happened to drive by and immediately pulled over after I waved him down. He approached the guy in the car very aggressively and told him off. The cop didn't arrest the guy or anything. The guy apparently told the cop the same. I thought he was a missing child story, but he did walk me over to the train station and stayed with me until the train actually arrived. Story 4. Grew up in Japan, not too small/not too big city. Worked a job that had me coming home daily at 2:04 a.m. daily. I preferred to walk the back street that paralleled the main street home because it felt more cozy and peaceful. Nothing of note happened until one day. I turned the corner onto the side street, and about halfway down there was a young woman. She wasn't doing anything, just staring at the sky. Staring straight up, neck at a 90-degree angle, mouth slightly agape, long black hair hanging. I hesitated but decided that, since nothing weird has ever happened here before, it'd be fine, so I went to walk by. I get up next to her. It's a narrow road, so not a lot of room to maneuver, and pause to look at her. She hasn't moved or reacted to me. She's just staring away. So I fight my instincts and ask her if she's okay. She doesn't react. I look up to see if she's looking at something, but there's nothing there. So now I'm thinking there's something medical going on, so I reach out and touch her on the shoulder. She jolts and looks at me like she's just noticed me. I ask if she's okay, and she just stammers and says sorry before hustling down the street the same way I was headed. I decided to smoke a cigarette to let some distance get between me and her, but towards the end of the street, she stops and stares at the sky again. Doesn't move for the whole 5 minutes it takes for me to finish my cig. I walk down the main street for the next couple nights. Story 5. I worked night shift for 7 years. One night a young, thin blonde woman was walking down the street at 2 a.m. with no pants or underwear on and a button-up shirt open. I tried to ask if she needed help, and she just stared forward, slowly walking staring forward. I called the police, and they came and stood in front of her, and she slowly walked into the cop's hand and stopped. I didn't stay and went back to work. I still think about her and what the fuck was going on. I tell myself it was sleepwalking on Ambien or something, and that she wasn't just assaulted and in complete shock. I'll never know. But she was very pretty and seemed well-groomed. Was very strange. Story 6. One time I was walking around my relatively safe neighborhood with 2 of my friends after midnight. We were probably 16 at the time. This loud red truck speeds by us, which is normal for the road we were on. Then a few minutes later, the same red truck drives by the opposite way, going much slower. Again, just a couple of minutes later, he drives by, but this time stops 100 or so feet away from us and just sits there. Realizing that this is not normal, we booked it through the yard to the next street over. For the next 20 or so minutes, we see this truck creeping up and down the neighborhood while we hid behind some bushes, and when we finally thought he was gone, we booked it to my house. He turned the corner onto my road just as we were about to open my front door. Story 7. I worked night shift on Kadena AB on Okinawa, Japan. I started walking to work because I didn't have a car. I really enjoyed the walks. It was a good way to wind down after work as the nights were cool and quiet, and I could listen to my music without worrying about anyone else around. One night, while walking home, I heard some rustling in the jungle of trees on the way home. Next thing I know, all of the lights went black and all I heard/felt was a loud whoosh coming right at my head. I screamed like a little girl, ran, and dropped my iPod. It broke. Once I made it past the trees, I realized it was one of the giant bats that lived on Okinawa. It scared the ever-living shit out of me. Story 8. I worked night shift on Kadena AB on Okinawa, Japan. I started walking to work because I didn't have a car. I really enjoyed the walks. It was a good way to wind down after work as the nights were cool and quiet, and I could listen to my music without worrying about anyone else around. One night, while walking home, I heard some rustling in the jungle of trees on the way home. Next thing I know, all of the lights went black and all I heard/felt was a loud whoosh coming right at my head. I screamed like a little girl, ran, and dropped my iPod. It broke. Once I made it past the trees, I realized it was one of the giant bats that lived on Okinawa. It scared the ever-living shit out of me. Story 9. I live out in the country, more woods and fields around me than houses. There are several dirt paths through the woods that farmers use for their tractors, and all during the day. I like to run on these paths because it's usually quiet and no traffic, unlike the road. During the hottest part of the summer, I run at night because it's cooler outside. So one night, it had rained during the day, so all the tracks on the path were gone. I was out running around midnight. I had an uneasy feeling but didn't see anything. But then I circled around, and on my second pass down a particular way, I saw my footprints. But then I saw another set of prints, bigger than mine, that hadn't been there before. Then I saw they made the turn the same way I had earlier. I cut it short that night, never saw anyone, but still. Story 10. Something like this happened a few years back. My boyfriend and I had been exploring some dirt roads on Vancouver Island, south of Nanaimo. We found this super run-down campsite beside a river and decided to take a look. It had been snowing the whole drive, and the whole site was covered in pristine snow. At one point we split up so I could find a place to pee. He went south and I went northwest. I finished up and wandered back south when I noticed completely fresh boot treads in the snow heading north and out of the site. They went right by where I'd stopped to pee in the bushes. My hair was standing on end when I alerted my BF to the tracks. They'd actually skirted the edge of the site from the road, past where I was peeing and north out into the woods. Needless to say, we got the fuck out of there fast. The trip back turned into a fiasco too. What a gong show. Adding fiasco. We had driven past a large metal gate on our way to the site. When we got back to it, we found it locked with 2 trucks already there. One was on our side and the other was on the opposite side. They were wrapping it in chains in order to bust the lock open. We stepped out of the car and were panicking a bit. It was dark, snow everywhere, and a couple of hours from home. The 2 trucks are about to step on the gas when some car pulls up and a lady jumps out, yelling. They were the ones that closed the gate on us. I suspect that they did it on purpose since the signage said 6 p.m. and it was 5 p.m. The lady opens the gate and we all leave. The 2 trucks start driving away like maniacs. They were long gone by the time we got past the dirt road and onto asphalt. That didn't last long though. We saw a lot of swerving tire tracks and it became clear that they were showboating. Then we came across the wreck. One of the trucks was overturned on the opposite side of the road. The other truck and a few more drivers were there helping the occupants. They weren't injured, but their truck was definitely stuck in the ditch. Honestly, I'm surprised they were all fine. Story 11. More backpacking than a walk, but this fucking terrifies me to this day. Our planned camping spot for the night was full. We'd backpacked all day to get to that location, and there wasn't anywhere close to set up our tents. We called our guy on the outside to come pick us up as it was getting late. We didn't have anywhere to set up camp, and a storm was approaching. We hiked to the nearest exit point on the trail, met our pickup guy, and he drove us a few miles to the nearest campsite we were familiar with that we could basically drive up to. Long logging path pretty deep in the mountains that we had hiked to in previous years, so we were kind of familiar with the area. Anyways, we hop out of the van and it's pitch black out. No moon. It's April in the mountains and still pretty chilly. We're cold, hungry, and exhausted. That's when we noticed this motherfucker staring at us from behind a tree. I know this sounds like a no-sleep story, but it's 100% true and probably the most scared I've ever been. We noticed this guy, no headlamp, no equipment, no backpack, just standing there. One of our group, former Marine, yells at him to come out and explain what his deal is. This guy walks a few feet out from behind the tree and we all shine our lights on him. And I shit you not, this dude's white t-shirt is covered in what looks like blood smears. He's pretty rough looking, long hair, long beard, crazy eyes, and he was wearing a bloody t-shirt and shorts in 35-degree weather at night. We're all pretty freaked out, and this is a pretty experienced group of hikers who've seen some shit. We asked this guy what his deal is, and he says we can't camp here. We tell him that that's exactly what we plan to do, and he says, I don't think that's a good idea for any of you. We kind of turn to discuss as a group, and when we look back, he's hidden back behind the tree. As a group, we basically decided none of us were getting any sleep that night if we stayed here, so we packed up the van and left. As we were pulling out, this guy pulled out one of those red-filtered flashlights and ran after our van. I'm not kidding, he followed us for at least a quarter mile on foot. He was fast as fuck. We passed a park ranger on the road and flagged him down to tell him how weird that dude was acting, and he said he'd go investigate. I didn't hear anything about it again for 5 years. For the longest time, I thought he was probably some pot farmer who had a nearby plot, or a moonshiner who was just living in the woods and didn't want us near his still. People hunt all the time out there, which would maybe explain the blood a little bit. But I was recently at an event with some of those guys again for the first time in years, and that creepy dude from the woods got brought up. One of them who still lives nearby broke out his phone and said, I forgot to tell you guys, I saw him again. Pulls up a news article, and there he was. So obviously the same guy. He'd been arrested for murdering some poor girl on the trail. Timelines didn't match up, so I fully believe we saw this guy shortly after he'd murdered someone else. He hasn't been charged with anything else as far as I'm aware. I'm not backpacking without a gun anymore.
Story 12. A couple years ago, I was at the start of a typical weekday night stroll. I was living in an apartment complex in Florida at the time, so it was the only opportune time to do so without being completely drenched. The exact moment I was crossing the sidewalk adjacent to the entrance of said complex, I witnessed a middle-aged dude punch his wife/significant other in her face, in full view of me and another passerby. The passerby called the cops. The dude was arrested. It wasn't a scary situation to my own well-being, but I did find the situation chilling. For one, how nonchalant the guy was in assaulting his wife/so in public, and two, how both the abuser/so were pleading for the cops not to be called. It was domestic abuse so normalized, it happened in full public without any second thought/rationale. Story 13. Was out for a late walk in the rain. Always enjoy it because it's peaceful, smells great, quiet, and never see anyone. Walked off this trail back into the road and saw a big pile of garbage under a tarp at the end of the cul-de-sac the trail ends in. Got a creepy chill like, that could be a dead body or something and I'd never know. Just got a weird feeling that snapped me out of my calm walk. Picked up the pace. About 500 yards away, parked car with a guy sitting there, in the dark, in the rain, like 11 pmish car off, just sitting there. Got super creeped out at this point and changed my route back to the main road and hurried home. Turns out it was a dead body someone had dumped under that tarp. Was under there for 4 days before someone investigated it. The guy in the car turned out to be just a random dude. Guy lives there and totally unrelated to the body. Still, took a few months off from my late night walks alone in the woods. Story 14. Many years ago, my boyfriend and I decided to take a late night walk around his generally safe neighborhood. We got a few steps past the driveway when a shirtless guy came running over with a hammer in one hand and a machete in the other. My boyfriend stayed super calm and asked the man what was going on. Apparently, some man had just broken into his apartment and tried to kidnap his young daughter, so he was chasing him down to either shatter his fingers with the hammer or chop off his hands entirely with the machete, and he thought my boyfriend was possibly this man. My boyfriend gave me his car keys and told me to take myself home. We lived apart at the time. So I went and got his car, and by the time I was backing out of the driveway, the man was screaming at my boyfriend, who was just standing there calmly with his hands in the air. I drove a block away so the man wouldn't see me, rolled the windows down to try to hear what was happening, and called the cops. The machete man ended up running off, and I don't know if they ever got him. My boyfriend was fine though, thank God. Story 15. I tried an electric bike my aunt had while we were visiting. I wasn't used to how abruptly it would accelerate, so when it did, I yelled for a second. My cousin was taking a video of me the whole time because I most probably would have done something to make an absolute fool out of myself, like crashing, and it would have been hilarious. So there I was, riding to the end of the street and turning back around when I noticed a lot of men holding large rocks in their hands. Barefoot came by as if they're hunting someone down. We were then told to come inside immediately as someone had just taken a machete and started attacking people at a party just around the corner where we were having a party. Later that night, we replayed the video and we noticed that when the bike accelerated and I yelled, a man walking in front of me was holding a machete. He startledly whipped around and glanced at me. We're glad he didn't swing the machete. He was so close he wouldn't have missed. He matched the description of the man who hacked random and multiple people that day. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more Reddit content.